Welcome everybody to another episode of the Internationalie podcast. Before we start, let me talk a little bit about the podcast. So, the Internationalie podcast is going to be a space where different international students, prospective ones, as well as current international students, could get a glimpse of the life of international students in the US or abroad. This week, I am joined by my very dear friend Patricia. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Patricia is from Nairobi, Kenya, and she's currently a senior at Smith College. She is an economics and mathematics double major, and she's also pursuing a concentration in global financial institutions. Do you want to add more to your bio?
Yeah, sure. I also did an year abroad at the London School of Economics and Political Science. It was a great experience, and I hope to share more.
Great, awesome. So the title of this episode is Dealing with Study Abroad. So as a first question for you, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word study abroad?
Moving away from home, far away from home, which I was already doing when I joined college. So going to LSE was double study abroad. So the first thing I think about is moving very far away to a place you've never been and having new experiences.
Great. That's actually such a beautiful way of describing what study abroad is. For me personally, I honestly came to know the term study abroad while I was in college. I didn't even know it was a thing that like people did when they went to study internationally, like, to another country when they go abroad to study. I didn't know there was a term for it, but my first exposure to like study abroad was when like campus recruiters would come to our colleges and they would advertise these study abroad experiences that were outside of the US. So let me ask you a question. So you mentioned that you studied abroad at the London School of Economics, or LSE. So what made you decide to study abroad?
Let me just start from the beginning. When I learned that you could study abroad, I think it's something I came across when I was applying to Smith, and I was like, okay, I'll keep it at the back of my mind, and then I'll think about it as we go by, because I already knew I wanted to major in economics. So I knew LSE, since it's a great school to go to. I knew it's somewhere I wanted to go if I had the opportunity to. Then as I went along my first year and then my sophomore year, my advisor actually brought it up again. I was like, okay, yeah, I am thinking about it. I had actually not looked at any other institution to study abroad in. There are like so many places you could go, so many, but I was sort of like set on LSE. And like, with her encouragement and thinking about the fact that I was thinking about it anyway, I thought it would be like a really great experience. Like, I had the chance, so why not just take it?
Yeah.
And have like 2 college experiences in 4 years. It was a good deal.
That's awesome, and I'm very happy to hear that. So, do you think it will be a fair assumption to say that international students who go to study in the US could be divided into two? Those half like that remain there for the 4 years and complete their studies, and then the other half that decide to go to another country again and experience study abroad?
Wait, you have to explain more. Like, what do you mean divided into two?
Well, so for me, I think from my experience, I was actually very surprised to find that most of my international friends decided to study abroad. Study abroad meaning like study abroad again, like going to another country.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like, especially like people do the study abroad junior year, right? So
Yeah.
junior year, I remember like we were just a few students in our friend group because most of them had left the campus. So I was just wondering, like, is it a fair division to make within international students between those who decide to study abroad and those who decide to remain on their campus?
Yeah, because I'm now also thinking about my own friend group, and I think a good portion of us decided to study abroad or away, and others decided they wanted to stay for like various reasons. Yeah, but I think it's something that very many people I talk to were open to, even though they might have decided not to go anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe for me personally, I could talk about why I decided to stay at the campus, and then maybe you could share your experience about like why you decided to study abroad again.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it was mostly like I could divide it like into two parts, like the reason why I decided to stay at Smith. So the first one was academics. So for me, my first year, as I talked about this earlier, was a mess. I was experimenting a lot. Like my grades weren't as great because I changed majors and stuff my second year. So I felt like, so I basically started my major, like taking classes for my major my second year. So I felt like if I studied abroad my third year, then I would be missing out on things. I would be short on credit, like all of these academic requirements that I had to complete by the time I graduated. So that was one of the reasons. The second one, which I think a lot of people might relate to, is that I didn't want to experience culture shock again. Like, the U.S. is its own bubble, and I've had like a long time practicing, I guess, or like trying to assimilate to that culture. It felt like such work for me to go to another country and then try to deal with all those new experiences and new things that you had to deal with. And then I think the third reason was also um, just concern about safety and traveling alone, which I understand I did the first time I went to college, but like this is also another experience. And so I think those were the three things that made me decide to continue staying at Smith and like finish my education. Um, do you relate with that? Did you have these thoughts when you were deciding to study abroad?
Yes, I actually had all three. I thought about all three things you've said. To begin with, like for academics, for me it really wasn't a concern because, like I said, right from the beginning, I knew I wanted to major in econ. So I was already taking the classes towards completing the major, even though I declared it much later. So I knew I knew I had to finish the core classes before sophomore year ended. So I was on track for that, and that wasn't really a concern. But like considering that LSE is a year-long program, you really have to think about it because you don't come back in senior year and realize, oh, I have all these classes I haven't taken, like these credits didn't transfer because I was a double major and it was econ and math. So I had to
Whoa.
think about, okay, I'll definitely finish my econ major at LSE because again, it's London School of Economics, but the credits will transfer. But for the math major, I really had to think about that and like think about the classes I was going to take to make sure I didn't come back and then the whole of senior year would just be math classes. So that was a concern for me, but I eventually figured it out with my advisor. Um, and the again, like thinking about, do I really want to start adjusting again? I'm going to this new place. I do not know anyone. I had never been to London.
Yeah.
I don't know anything. I was scared. I really was. I wouldn't even lie. Even after I got into LSE, I did question and wonder if it's too late to like turn back and say I won't go because it was
Yeah.
an entire year and I was scared and I was nervous about it. But then again, the whole purpose of studying abroad for me was getting out of my comfort zone and challenging myself and getting out of that bubble I was in while at Smith because it's such a small community. You
Yeah.
have people who are close to you. and it's so tight knit. And then going to this big university in the middle of the city, they have a whole different education system that I sort of wasn't used to. So it was about me getting out and challenging myself because I had the opportunity to. And like with challenging yourself and facing the challenges, you do grow. So that
Right.
was really important to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's an experience that a lot of international students could relate to. And by the way, I just want to mention that I remember the day that you got your news, because we were taking the class together. Do you remember?
Yeah.
We were taking econ together, and I think we were studying for a midterm or something. It was like spring semester for my senior year, and it was
Yeah.
spring semester for your sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were studying for a midterm, and you were so excited to tell me that you got into LSE. But then
Yeah.
I could also see that you were a bit nervous about it. But I just wanted to say that I'm very proud of you for, going and like challenging yourself, and then also like getting such a great education from such a great university. Um, but I want to go back to the point you raised about challenging yourself and growing as a person.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is important for international students to do that?
I think like the sophomore before I went to LSE, it was my first experience working outside campus and working with people who aren't students. And I think even even though that happened after I got into LSE, it also made me realize again why I wanted to do this, because you get so exposed to like different people and different ideas, um, and different hard things that come with being an international student or being from a different country. And I think I needed to make myself stronger and more resilient. Um, and I think why that is important for international students, or basing it on my experience, like from day one, I was very close to international students because we had the ISP, which is the International
Yes.
Students Pre-Orientation. So most
Mm-hmm.
of my friends were international students, and even
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, like my closest friends are still international students. So I think I was sort of living in sort of like a bubble because I didn't want to push myself to interact with different people or put myself in uncomfortable situations. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I needed to remove myself from that and prepare myself for what is out there in the real world, and put myself in those uncomfortable situations for me, like
Mm-hmm.
learning to interact with people, learning to get to know people outside people you'd normally be friends with, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was it for me. And also pushing myself to, say, in classes, like think more deeply about, for me, it was economic situations, which I know the curriculum at LSE is really focused on. So it's more about what happens in real life more than like
Mm-hmm.
textbook situations. So I was
Right.
pushing myself to actually think and challenge myself academically.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. There's also some, like, I remembered when you mentioned about the fact that there is a very close knit community of international students, especially at Smith, which is like a small college. Like, you tend to create those friendships with international students the day you meet them, right? The
Mm-hmm.
ISP, as you mentioned. So
Yeah.
what were some of the things that you used, or some of the things that you did to maintain those close relationships when you studied abroad? What were the challenges you faced?
I think the first challenge I'd say is, I mean, didn't I knew my friends would always be there for me, and I would always be there for them. But then we didn't communicate as often as we thought we would, because before you go, you're like, yeah, we'll stay in touch and we'll do all these things. But then
Yeah.
now there's a 5 hour time difference.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has their schoolwork going on, and you have work. You have to adjust. People are preparing to study abroad in other countries,
Mm-hmm.
so you might not stay in touch as much as you wish you would.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have video calls, once in a while with my friends. There was also it was also difficult because you'd see your friends hanging out, and you'd really miss them,
Oh,
and you'd feel
yeah.
like you're missing out on
Mm-hmm.
something, or like if you went back, your relationship wouldn't be the same.
Mm-hmm.
So those were fears for me. But then again, some of my friends did study abroad in London in the spring, so we got to meet then. So yeah, I feel like just once in a while, I know people have busy schedules, and there's the time zone difference, and there's all these other things happening. But like once in a while, just checking in how everything is going was helpful. And
Yeah.
just knowing that no matter where we were, I'd still have them as my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I also relate to what you said because as I mentioned, like half of like my friend groups also studied abroad, and so one
Mm-hmm.
of the challenges that we faced was how do we keep in contact? How do we communicate still? Because some of them left for a whole year,
Mm-hmm.
just like you did, because some of the programs of study abroad, some of them are for a semester, some of them are for your whole junior year. So I think it's really important to keep those friendships that you have developed your first, your second year. For me personally, I used to Skype with some of my friends who studied abroad, and I found that to be very helpful because after they came back, we were still able like to continue that friendship. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel weird, or it
Yeah.
didn't feel like someone I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think it goes to show the strong international community that we were able to form as students. And now I want to ask you another question, which is what were some of the interesting challenges that you faced when you studied abroad in London specifically?
Um, okay, okay, let me start with the academics,
Okay.
because that one was a big change for me, like how they do things at LSE. To begin with, for me, the big lecture halls and all these students was kind of intimidating for me
Yeah.
because I'm used to these small classes, like 10 people, and you
Mm-hmm.
have a relationship with your professor and all those things. But it wasn't the same. You had all these students, it was really fast paced. We covered so much in like 10 weeks because I think that's how long their terms were. So things just moved so quickly, and you always felt like you were left behind, and all these people know what they're doing, and you feel so lost. So that was a little challenging for me. Sort of feeling like I'm always catching up. I don't know what's going on in class. Because I think what they learn in their first year and their second year isn't this. I mean, it's the same general thing that we learn, but maybe it might be different because for some of the things the professor was talking about, and they're like, oh, you have covered this in your first and second year, and I'm like, I
Ah,
haven't seen this before.
right,
and,
right.
and that was difficult because now I was thinking, is it that I didn't learn the things the way I should have? These people know all these things, I don't know them. I was getting like very anxious. um
Yeah.
and also the fact that the exams were much later in the year.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have all these constant tests that you were doing. um Made me nervous for when the exams finally came, so that was a challenge, like learning how to um get the discipline to review material on your own constantly, because you don't have all these tests to know where you stand in the course. You just have that final exam, so you really have to keep going over the material slowly, and then get the confidence to go for they had tutoring hours. So we had professors who did the lectures, and then we had classes where PhD students taught. So it was sort of like building the confidence to go for those tutoring hours and
Mm-hmm.
not be ashamed to ask questions, even though it's things they say you should have learned in your first and second year, but just
Right.
going and say like I don't know, and going through it slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, like when you stop feeling ashamed that you don't know all these things, or feeling like you're not smart enough. In the end, like, they were really helpful. So it was something, you know, building that confidence in the end was very helpful for me. And another, like, moving away from the academics and moving to the social side.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. I wouldn't normally go up to someone and say hi like randomly, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know you. So again, making friends, because you're there for an entire year. You want to do stuff. You don't want to do them alone. So it was. I had a roommate, which was
Okay.
also different, because I had a roommate my first year. I didn't have a roommate my second year. I do love having my own space. So
Right.
again, learning to live with someone, and you don't really know them, learning how to share space again,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to interact with people in the house that I was living in. Um, they had all these activities, which was really nice. And like getting out of my comfort zone and going to those activities and talking to people. So I had people to eat with,
Right.
during meals.
Yes.
And then again in school, like, making sure I know someone in the class at least.
Mm.
And I think also for that, like, speaking, about the social life, there was this like Facebook group, before we went to LSE, with all the people who were going to study abroad.
Okay.
Um,
Wait,
so
sorry.
I
Is it only for like Smith students who are studying abroad at LAC, or what was the Facebook group for?
It was a book, Facebook group for
Yeah.
everyone from all these other schools that was studying abroad at
Oh,
LSE for that year.
nice.
Um, and it's now like, when I was scrolling through, like, everyone who'd be coming, that I noticed, oh, there was another Kenyan. So I was like,
Ah,
okay, let me reach out, make sure I have at
nice.
least one person I know, and that was
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Yeah.
Reaching out and like finding out who else at Smith is going to be there, because some people weren't there for the pre-orientation on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know who was going to be at Smith. So reaching out to those people,
Right.
um, just getting yourself out there, and doing all these things. And another thing was traveling alone and doing things alone and taking the
Yes.
tube alone. Those were like, I got nervous about this stuff. Like, even just taking the tube, I'm like,
Yeah, they call it
there are
the
so
tube,
many
right?
people. Yeah, they call it the tube. It's like the subway, and
Right.
everyone is minding their own business. So I'm like, if I get stuck, what do I do? Like, will anyone be willing to help me? Those were like scary experiences. Like, when I had to go somewhere
Right.
on my own, and I had to like go on Google Maps, figure out which tube to take. There was, I think, I don't know. I can't quite remember how they labeled them, but you had to figure out which train went where and when it
Mm-hmm.
left. Those things made me so nervous. um,
Yeah.
but I'd say, yeah, those are like just some of the challenges that I had to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so again, just building the confidence and knowing that you deserve to be there, and not
Right.
feeling like, you're not smart enough,
Mm-hmm.
to be there. There's no such thing. Um, Getting out of my comfort zone, especially socially, and just having the courage to go out and do things like taking the tube.
Right. That's
Yeah.
actually, thank you for sharing that, Patricia, because I think a lot of people would relate to that, because not only are you experiencing these things in a new country, in a new environment, but like imagine if you don't speak the language, or if you don't um know anybody there. Well, at least in London they speak English, although they have a different accent. I think
Yeah.
it might be easier to kind of, but I think, okay, so did you have any because I wanted to ask you this question,
Yeah.
because I assume, like, I would assume that the professors would have like British accents, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So did you have a hard time like understanding what they were saying in the lectures?
No, like, surprisingly, I think I only had one British professor. Every
Mm-hmm.
other professor or teacher was from this other country. probably
Ah,
another European country. So they also had their own accents. I had, like, it was sort of comforting to know that I
yeah.
wasn't the only one with this accent that wasn't, American or British. Like, everyone, for them, English was their second language, which was
Wow. That's nice.
comforting for me because
Yeah.
what I also noticed is that no one was telling me to repeat what I was saying all the time, which is something I have experienced in the
Right.
US, which was different here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember having problems like hearing their accents,
Mm-hmm.
or them hearing mine, which was like a relief, like a
Right?
break, and I didn't
Yeah.
mind it. I didn't mind it. Like, people are from everywhere.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes the study abroad experience even more exciting, is because you get to interact with a lot of people from all over the world, like even more than you interacted with your like home institution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um so I want to ask you, did you form that kind of like close knit friendships with the people you met at LSE just like you did at Smith, or was it different?
Um, yes, I did. Like I said, I messaged the Kenyans, so I knew them when I went to LSE and we had orientation for a week. And
Mm-hmm.
because we were living in different housing communities, so they met people in their house, and I met people at the house I was living in. And so, like, our friend group was sort of like people I knew, people they knew, and now these are the people I hang out with a lot. And it was like we were just thinking about it, and it was like sort of crazy. Like, we were from different universities in the US,
Right.
but we felt like we had known each other for ever. Like, we went to the same schools and everything. And
Yes.
these people were the people I did take some classes with them. I traveled with them on all my trips.
Mm-hmm.
And then we still keep in touch. So it was sort of like the same relationships I found during my orientation, just that now it was more people from more different countries, and
Mm-hmm.
different universities, not just the people I was with at Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I did make good friends.
That's great. And I'm
Yeah.
very glad to hear that. And the reason why I asked that question is because a lot of times when once you make those friendships with the people that are closer to you
Mm-hmm.
and then you move away, you kind of
Yeah.
miss that relationship that you've already formed.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm glad to learn that, people are still nice and you could still make friendships wherever you go. I think
Yeah.
that's one quality that you take from your experience as an international student, because you
Mm-hmm.
tend to interact with so many different people
Mm-hmm.
every single day.
Yeah.
Um, so going to my next question is, what do you think are the pros and cons of studying abroad?
Um, the pros for me were like the exposure it gave me, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like the people I interacted with, the classes I had, the career opportunities I sort of started to think about because they had all these career fairs. And I mean, it's the middle of London, and I'm interested in finance and econ, and that's a hub. So that was something, for me, that I got exposed to a little more than I would have at Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Another pro for me was that Smith didn't doesn't have as many finance related classes. It's mostly
Okay.
econ, but now I got the chance to take all these finance classes. And also, the unfortunately, the African Studies department at Smith is not as big, but they had a
Mm-hmm.
very big, developed, funded department.
Yeah.
And so it meant
Yeah.
that I got to take this class for an entire year on the African economy, something I didn't have the chance. I was just learning about the European economy and the American economy, but now I got
Right.
to learn about the African economy, which
Mm-hmm.
was important for me. Another pro is, for me, it was like I was I did learn to be independent while at Smith, because again, I wasn't living at home. But then there was like an added lesson on independence when I was living in London, because they don't have the same, small, you're taken care of structure like we did
Mm-hmm.
have at Smith. Like my house was like 20 minutes away from campus, or maybe 25 minutes. You had all the meals weren't catered for, so you had to think about, what am I going to eat for lunch? Something I didn't have to think about while at Smith.
Right.
You have
Which
to
is
learn.
important.
Yeah, you
Yes.
have to learn how to do things by yourself, like learn how to budget and plan. Something I didn't speak about, but was important: finances.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Learning how to plan, for your meals, for all these other activities you want to do, because they cost money. London
Yeah.
is expensive, but you also want to experience it, so you have to learn how to manage your finances. So that was a pro, because I know I need these things when I'm graduated and I'm a proper adult. Um,
Right? Yes.
um, what else? And again, you learn how to push yourself. For me, it was pushing myself to think more about econ and the things I'm learning, to push myself more to apply to companies that I told myself there's no way I'm going to get in, but to just go out and do it, because now I know all
Yes.
these opportunities are there.
Mm-hmm.
Another Okay, now the cons. um
Okay.
I want to start with finances once again. So while at Smith, we have these work study programs, and usually it's much easier to get the opportunities on campus at Smith.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're studying abroad, you have to look for these opportunities outside of the school, um, which I didn't have experience in doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to think about that, like, if you want an extra source of income, like how do you do that? Um, how do you fund all these things that you're doing? So that's a con,
Yeah.
because you had all these things at Smith, your meals were catered for, all of them. You didn't have much to spend on outside if you had financial aid, so you have to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Another con is on the academics. Like you said, you have to fulfill a certain amount of credits before you graduate. And sometimes when you study abroad, the classes you thought you'd take, you might not actually end up taking. So you have to sort of like refigure everything out and make everything work out. Like I remember the courses I, put on the plan, and I was like, okay, if I take these courses, I'll be on course. I come back senior year, I won't have to take that many classes in econ and math. And then I went there and realized this plan wouldn't work. I have to refigure everything out. I have to reach out to my advisor. I have to figure
Yeah.
out if the credits will transfer. So
Yeah.
I think on the academics, it could get kind of tricky if you don't have a backup plan, and that could be a
Mm-hmm.
con. Like if you come back and realize the credits didn't transfer like you thought they would.
Yeah.
Um, but
So talking
those
to your advisor first, you would say would be beneficial.
and constantly, just to make sure everything
E.
still looks right. And if you
Right.
change your plan on your academics, if you decide you don't want to take a certain class, let them know before you
Mm-hmm.
change, and then you realize it won't transfer the way you thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
So I get finances, and the academic switch could be difficult and could be a con for some people. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Patricia. And I'm sure like a lot of people who are planning to study abroad or who have previously studied abroad could like actually um relate to the things that you have brought up in our conversation. So, as we are ending our conversation, what advice do you have for those international students who are planning to study abroad?
I'd say plan early. Start thinking about the programs you'd like to go to, and then if you need to take a foreign language, which I know is a case for Smith, I don't know about other schools, but if you need to take a foreign language or learn the language, if you're going to a country that doesn't speak English dominantly, just plan ahead and know that that's something you have to do. Look at the application beforehand so that you're not rushing. If they have rolling admissions, then you have to apply early enough before the places fill up. Talk to your advisor early enough. Express the interest that you have, because for some you do require recommendations, so you need to identify the professors you need recommendations from, and talking to them about the things that you're doing, so that they can put that in the recommendation if you wish them to. If you need to write a personal statement, I know I did have to, so you have to think about that early enough so you have time to write it, edit it, have someone else read it, preferably someone who did the program. That was helpful for me. Another thing I'd advise you to do is think about finances. It's not the most fun thing to do, but you should think about it. You should know, the finances that you have, but you should also identify ways your school is helping you in that way. If you're on financial aid, how does that translate when you go study abroad? If you need extra help, where can you get it? There are probably funds, so you should look out and see if there's any funds that you haven't utilized yet, and go for it. Another thing I'd advise you to do is, if you haven't been saving and you want to travel, start saving. If you have a job on campus in the spring before you go, make sure you save then. If you have a job over the summer, make sure you save then. And also, like, talking to people who have done it before, listening to their experiences. One, it will give you like a vision, or like help you envision yourself and see if it's something you're interested in. That was something for me, like talking to those people and hearing about the experiences, and then thinking, okay, is this something I'd want to do, before you apply, and then you realize no. And also like learning about how the experiences were, places they traveled to that they would 10 over 10 recommend, places they ate, places they shopped, and they know it's much less to shop here than to shop there. That was helpful. That was a pro tip. And another thing I'd advise you, I talked about the academics, talking to your advisor and having a clear plan all the way to when you graduate, so that you're going to graduate on time. And then what else? I'd say, if you really want to do it, if you have the opportunity to do it, go for it. You might go feeling afraid. I definitely was, but it was a wonderful experience. I will do it again if I had the chance to. So if you do have the opportunity to, if your school gives you the opportunity to, even though you're afraid and you might think that things won't go the way you thought to, or it will be too hard, just do it. Like, especially if you have done it before as an international student, you can surely do it again. What else? And travel and do things when you can, and early enough. There's no perfect time to do things, so just go out and do it and get the most out of the opportunity that you have.
Those are some really like great advices that you've given, Patricia, like even for international students in general, like not even planning to study abroad. For me personally, the advice that I would be giving for people, like international students who are planning to study abroad, is first, like, ask yourself why. Like, why do I want to study abroad? Because a lot of times people get pressured to do certain things even though they don't want to do it. And I have seen that happen. Like, most of my friends were studying abroad, but I didn't let that, pressure me into like, yeah, this is something I have to do as well. Like, let me go and study abroad because, you need to have a very honest conversation with yourself and ask yourself, like, what do you want to get out of the study abroad experience? Why do you want to go? Is it something that you would regret if you don't go, or like make a list of the things that you want to accomplish while you study abroad, and I think that will keep you in check and like have your goals always in mind. The second thing I think you also mentioned is to like do the research, because this is an independent journey that you're taking on, right? Because you might be the only one from your college studying abroad at a certain place, and um, it kind of puts a lot of pressure on you to do all the research, to do all the asking and all the networking that is required before you go, which I think is part of the challenge. But it's also very exciting because you get to know something new every day while you research. And finally, I would just like to say, like, challenge is good. But it depends on the person, because if you're not ready and you decide to challenge yourself, then you might not enjoy the experience, right? So again, like having that honest conversation with yourself and asking yourself, like, is this something I want to do, I think would be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, I like what you said about knowing where you want to do it, because remembering that during the when times are hard and you're wondering why you put yourself in that situation in the first place, like remembering the goals that you had and how you felt when you were applying and when you got in will keep you going. And again, if you don't feel like study abroad is something for you, and all your friends are going, and you feel like you really don't have to do it, then that's okay too. But yeah, that having that goal, or like the why, is important, and I like that you pointed that out.
Yeah. And with that, we end our conversation about study abroad. Thank you so much, Patricia, for agreeing to be my guest. I hope that a lot of people would learn from the stories that we've shared. Is there any last thing that you want to say?
Um, if you plan to, or if you don't plan to study abroad, and if you make that decision, go for it with your full heart and enjoy every experience, the good and the bad. In the end, I think they all contributed in very positive ways in my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, just go for it. Whatever decision you make, just go for it.
Great. I love that. Before we end, I just want to say please make sure to follow the official Instagram page for the Internationally podcast, which is at Internationally by Ruth, LIE. And also, if you have any questions and concerns about being an international student, please send your emails to internationallybyruth@gmail.com. Thank you so much again for tuning in today. I hope you have a lovely week ahead of you and take care of yourselves. And thank you again, Patricia, for being an awesome guest.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great week.